It is November 21st of 1944, and in Germany, a trail of contrails is seen at 25,000 feet. These are B-17s from the 8th Air Force. Immediately, flak crews are ordered to the ready, and fighters vectored to intercept. But this was not going to be a typical defense effort by the German anti-aircraft crews and pilots. This was Merseburg, the most heavily defended city in the Reich. More guns, more fighters, and for the men in the B-17s, more casualties. And this mission in particular would be one of the worst. But why was this city such a well-armed fortress? What happened in this disastrous raid? And how did this target become known to the Allied air crews as Murdersburg? This is a real letter from 1944, written to Sergeant Leland Potter, a B-17 gunner of the 351st Bomb Group, from his wife in California.
However, as you can see, it would never be delivered, marked as missing in action, returned to sender when it arrived in England. When I got this letter, I wondered if I could find out what happened to Sergeant Potter and why he never received this letter. And after some digging, I found my answer. Because when it was on its way to him in 1944, Leland Potter and his B-17 crew were already in the briefing room for one of the deadliest missions of the war.
The target given to the 8th Air Force was Merseburg, Germany, or to the Allied air crews, Merseburg. And specifically, they would be trying to hit the synthetic fuel plants that were located there and across the river at Leuna. These were among the most crucial targets in all of the Reich, and Hitler's commanders had been smart enough to realize that. It was clear that if the German war machine would sputter for any reason, it would almost certainly be oil and fuel. Thus, anti-aircraft defenses were built all around Merseburg and trained well. According to American infantry units that captured the city in 1945, they found no less than 600 flak guns defending Merseburg. These were typically the mighty 88mm and even up to 120mm cannons, both of which could fire well over 30,000 feet. These could lay down a thick blanket of smoke and shrapnel for any Allied crews that found themselves in the airspace overhead. In addition, the target was surrounded with decoy buildings and factories to throw off American bombardiers and navigators, as well as false bodies of water that would be altered to try and confuse air crews attempting to find their way. Making things even more challenging, some of these decoy factories even included pyrotechnics to simulate bombs exploding, and false flak flashes to try and appear as if the fake buildings and factories were heavily defended. It would be discovered after the war that in some raids, more bombs fell on the decoy factories than the actual target itself. Furthermore, at the Leuna plant here, smoke screens were added so that the targets were difficult to see. This resulted in bombardiers simply having to guess or drop their payloads in the area of the factories, where even if they did land a hit, every vital machine there was surrounded by 15 to 20 inches of reinforced concrete.
These extensive efforts proved that Merseburg was without a doubt the most valuable asset in all of the Reich, and that any attempt to strike it would be costly. But the target was the target, and the 351st Bomb Group headed to their aircraft and got their engines running.
The recipient of our letter, Sergeant Leland Potter, got on board of B-17 43-37727, flown by Lieutenant Warren Lohendorf, which, according to my research, did not yet have a name. But for this video, we will call their aircraft Tootsz. Tootsz and the rest of the unit took off and formed up over the channel with the rest of the B-17s assigned from other air bases across England. As they approached Merseburg from about 80 miles out, the German defensive systems sprang to life. All factory personnel were ordered to their air raid shelters, all firefighters sent to their posts, and smoke screens were lit, filling the sky with a gray and black haze. In addition, experienced and well-trained flak crews sprinted to their positions, pointing their cannons skyward until the contrails of the American bombers could be seen. And on this strike on November 21st, as the German crews gauged their altitude and speed, preparing to open up, the fortresses had their own challenges to deal with. As the formations approached Merseburg, a weather front had moved into the area. This brought with it thick clouds up to 30,000 feet, which would completely obscure the target. So the leading bomb crew from the 91st Bomb Group made a bold decision. In order to complete the mission, they opted to drop down below the clouds lower than 20,000 feet in order to attain visibility and put their bombs on the mark. Potter and the 351st followed them down. This, unfortunately, would expose them even more to the already deadly German flak that had now begun to fire. The alternative choice would not have gone much better. The 398th Bomb Group, who had missed the order to drop down, climbed above the clouds to get a better look at the target. Here, alone and exposed, they were pounced on by German Focke-Wulfs. These took down 5 B-17s in a matter of minutes, just a few thousand feet above Tootsz and the rest of the bomb wing.
Now, one important detail is that for Sergeant Leland Potter and his crew, this was just their third mission. So his wife, after writing this letter, had just gotten the news that he had arrived in England and was writing to encourage him about his upcoming missions. To me, this is the best way to grasp the human element of war, by first-hand accounts of the people who lived it. And you can get letters just like this sent right to you with this video's sponsor, Letters from War. Letters from War is my personal project where we send a letter every month to or from a real service member in World War II serving on the front lines, as well as other pieces of history relating to his unit, his service, and his story, as well as a monthly history quiz and special bonus items. This one, for example, talks about counting his missions, Thanksgiving dinner, and the nickname of his wife, Tootsz, all while the recipient was flying on his way to Merseburg. If you want to read this letter to Sergeant Potter and tons of other great content that helps to keep these stories alive, join Letters from War at the link below in the comments. It's the perfect gift for any history fan, and right now, for a limited time, you can use code POTTER for 50% off your order, which is the biggest discount we've ever offered. Start with November's package featuring this letter sent right before Sergeant Potter went missing. You don't want to miss it. Now, as Merseburg approaches, let's pick up with what happened to the rest of the bombers that went low.
As the other fortresses snuck below the clouds, the 14th Flak Division opened fire. They tracked the bombers closely, which were now ripe targets at the lower altitude. Here in these photos, we can see just how thick the flak was at Merseburg on a normal day, filling the sky with black spots all around the bombers. And this particular mission was even worse. According to one of the crew members of the 398th Bomb Group, the flak was so thick that the smell of gunpowder almost overwhelmed them in their aircraft, and that the spent flak shrapnel was raining down like hail on the aluminum skin of their B-17. This was a long few minutes as they trudged forward towards the city, locked into their bombing runs. Through the smoke screens and flak, finally, the lead bombardier got over the Luena plant at Merseburg. After a few moments of trying to decipher what was the real target, what was a decoy, and struggling to keep his bomb sight precise, he released the payload. The rest of the group would follow suit, and high explosive bombs fell down, with flashes seen all around the plant. But due to the smoke screens and chaos, the results were difficult to accurately assess. The men on board of the fortresses simply had to hope that they had done the job. Meanwhile, as the bombs fell, the 14th Flak Division continued to pour fire at the bombers, who were now directly above them in their well-fortified positions. At approximately 12 o'clock p.m., they would score a direct hit on the Lohendorf B-17, Tootsz. This round struck the aircraft near the number 4 engine, which began pouring smoke. Then, shortly after, caught on fire. The witness statement from another aircraft who saw this occur is written as follows.
I, Reich, was flying as ball turret gunner on aircraft number 43-3956, which was flying in the low flight of the lead element, on the mission to Merseburg, Germany, on the 21st of November, 1944. Just after we left the target, I noticed that at about 6 o'clock and a little below the plane I was flying, there was a ship whose number 3 engine was smoking. I am not sure that this was Lieutenant Lohendorf's plane, but it bore the red diagonal marking of our group. Shortly afterwards, I noticed the engine was on fire. It peeled off to the left and started into a dive, going into the clouds that made it impossible for me to see it any longer. I saw no parachutes. As far as I know, this was the only one of our planes not still in the formation.
This, indeed, was Lohendorf's plane. On board of the aircraft, things quickly unraveled into chaos as the fire was much worse than it appeared from the outside. As the flame was ignited with the bomb bay doors open, a larger fire began in the center of the aircraft that cut off communications and burned hotter with every second. Harold Dillon, one of the waist gunners on Tootsz, wrote later on,
"We were shot up pretty bad by flak. Our number 4 engine was out. After dropping bombs, the bombardier tried to shut the bomb bay doors, but they lacked about 6 inches of closing. The fire broke out immediately in the number 3 gas tank and in the bomb bay. Gas was blowing into it, burning like a blowtorch. The fire was intense and increased rapidly, and pretty soon, we in the rear were cut off from those in front."
Quickly, it became apparent that the B-17 was finished, and that every man should attempt to escape from their crippled plane. But this was easier said than done.
I think we bailed out in 5 minutes or less after the fire was first noticed. The engineer, Sergeant Potter, reported that the cockpit was full of smoke, and the co-pilot opened his window. The engineer, again, Sergeant Potter, was burned on the neck and wrists. The ball turret gunner reported that the plane turned a half circle and exploded. He opened his chute as soon as he left the plane. I delayed opening my chute until I had dropped 10 or 15,000 feet and never saw the plane again after bailing out.
In just a few minutes, the dreaded flak at Merseburg had hit Tootsz and sent her falling downwards as a burning pile of metal. But in the chaos, who had survived? The answer wasn't always clear, and even once crews landed on the ground, men simply had to save themselves, and then were usually captured shortly after landing, with little to no knowledge about the fates of their comrades. And typically, the pieces wouldn't be completely put together until many weeks later.
Landing on the ground in their chutes were 6 of the 9-man crew. Normally, a B-17 carried 10, but Tootsz was flying short of 1 waist gunner that day. The tail gunner, ball turret gunner, waist gunner, radio man, bombardier, and engineer, Sergeant Leland Potter, touched down on German soil and were quickly captured. Meeting together in German interrogations shortly thereafter, they were told that 3 bodies were found from their crew. Later on, it became clear that 2 of these were the remains of the pilot and co-pilot. According to reports from the survivors, like Leland Potter, it is believed that it became too hot in the cockpit with the fire in the bomb bay, and that they were either incapacitated or killed while trying to bail out, as the fortress exploded over Merseburg. And perhaps most tragically, it appeared that the navigator may have even been able to get out, but cost himself precious seconds trying to grab something in the nose and was then killed in the explosion.
He was said to have been fumbling around with something up in the nose when the engineer and bombardier bailed out.
Upon receiving the order to bail out, the navigator began searching frantically for something. He could not find what he was looking for and delayed too long before starting for the nose hatch, thus perishing when the plane exploded.
According to these crew reports, Flight Officer Jordan Ivanhoff was last seen by Sergeant Leland Potter as he was searching for something in the nose when Potter jumped from the front escape hatch. This would unfortunately cost him his life, as the aircraft exploded shortly after. What he was looking for, we can only imagine. In addition, with Sergeant Potter not returning to base, this letter would arrive at the airbase shortly after the November 21st raid to Merseburg. His wife would tragically get the news that he was missing and the returned letter a few weeks later. But luckily, he would live to see her again. In the final tally for the raid on Merseburg, 260 total bomb squadrons passed over the Luena plants. Of the more than 12,000 bombs dropped from these formations, only 260 landed within the area of the plant, and of these, 36 failed to explode. In exchange, no less than 20 American bombers were shot down.
Merseburg would continue to operate, but with each strike, its capacity trickled downwards, until in 1945, when the Nazi war machine would run dry from oil and fuel deprivation. But with each raid, the mighty 8th paid the price, and because of this dreaded target with its heavy fortifications and deadly flak would come to be known as Murdersburg to Allied air crews, the worst target in all of Europe. Don't forget to join Letters from War to read this letter to Sergeant Potter, and so that I can continue to make videos like this one. Use code Potter for 50% off your order. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.